So the next step that I'm going to do is to split the data into test and train data sets. And ML, let's go here and double click on it. And let me write a try catch here, try catch. If in case of an exception, we can show it. Message box, ex.message. And to store the data into train and test, let me create few labels here, and those labels will be matrix, float, let me call it train, and x. Let us initialize them with null, and x underscore test, it's also null. And similarly, we need to store the integer labels of matrix. So y underscore train labels, then let's say it's null, and y underscore test is equal to null. Okay, now the first thing we need to make sure that there is some data in our data sets. So data underscore set, if this one equals null, it means there is no data has been read. Or data underscore label equals null. I'm just going to throw a new exception, load data first. Okay, if we have read the data, then we can split it into a train and a test data set. So let me create another method in this helper class for splitting the data into test and training data sets. Let's do it like this: public, and it should be also static, and it will return basically 4 matrices. So I'm just going to copy these same, but remember it's a tuple, so train data and its labels, test data and its labels. And we can name this method like test train split, and we can provide the parameters right here. The first parameter that we need is a matrix of floats, that is, we will provide all the data and call it, I name it like data, and another matrix, and this one will be of type integers, and we name it like labels, so we provide the labels. And the last parameter that we need is a split, how much you want for the test. Let me initialize with a 2.2. it means that 20% we want to be the test data. If we do not provide this parameter, it's optional. So the first here we will write a try catch. If we have an exception, we should throw an exception object first. Okay, ex.message. Okay, and the first I need to find out how many test samples I will have, so I just name it like n, and we can do like labels dot rows, how many rows we have, multiply by its split, so by the percentage, so it will give us some number. And of course it may be a float number, so we can do something like integer, so that we will get n number of test samples. And now which samples we want to select, it's an important question. We want to select it randomly. So to generate a random number between 0 and max, let's say labels dot rows minus 1, it means that I want to find out the indexes of the random numbers within these rows from 0 to, let's say, rows minus 1 index. So I will select a n number of samples between this minimum and a maximum. And I think I can also write a method here to first generate the random numbers. So I need to write many methods. So it is easier to work with. So maybe I will need to reuse it, so I just call it static, and I need a random number generator, random num generator. It's an array of numbers actually, integer min, integer max, and how many numbers do we need? So I am using this random class to generate random numbers. Let me do it like this, is equal to new random number. So this one will generate basically one number, but I need many numbers, so n numbers actually. I just call it list is equal to new random numbers, and I want to make sure that there is no repetition in the random number generation. So once I generate the number, I don't want that same number to be, I don't want the same sample to be used again as a test data. So to make sure, I'm just doing this while my list.count is less than n, sorry, this n, I want to generate a random number, rand num dot next, and this number must be between the minimum and the maximum, otherwise I will be out of the range. And I will make sure there is no duplicate, and if not my list dot contains this number, then I will add it into the list dot add this num, and once I generated n numbers, then I can return the list as an array, so to array. Okay, so this one will generate n random numbers for me, and to make sure that there is no duplicate, I need to work something like this. You can have a better option as well. So coming back to this test train split, we can fix this one like variable test indices or indexes is equal to helper function dot, we can call this random number generator between the minimum and maximum and n. So this will give us the indexes for our test, which we will be using for our test data, and the rest will be used for the training. So here we need a bunch of matrices. Float, this one will be for x underscore, let me say test, is equal to new matrix, and we now know the exact size of the matrix. So n number of samples will be used for training, and the number of features will be the same as in our original data, so number of columns. And another one we need for matrix of integers, and we just name it y underscore test. And for y underscore test, we will have the same number of rows, that is samples, but only one column because it's just the label. So this is for the test and a train. Let me copy and paste it for the training data. So train, and here the number of samples will not be n, it should be the remaining one. So data dot rows minus n, and the columns will be same. Similarly, for the training labels, we will also have minus n. So we will remove the test ones and only the training ones will remain here. Okay, now we can loop through all this data and put them into test and train labels or train data respectively. So first I need to define the test indexes is equal to 0 and the train index is equal to 0. So to keep track of which data has been read or how many data have been read. So now I need to loop through all the rows in our whole data set, data.rows, and if this test indices dot contains this row, then it means that we need to add this one into x underscore train. So I need to define another loop. J is equal to 0 to data dot columns. I need to read all the data in every row into x underscore test for that particular instance. So test index comma j is equal to data, our row number that is going in the main loop, and the j. Okay, so we just copy the data from for this particular row into this index, and this is just for the test data. We also need to copy the label as well, so y underscore test, and this one will be test index comma 0 is equal to whatever the label we have at this index, row comma 0. And once we read the first instance, we need to increase the index so that we will read the next. And if this row is not in our test indexes, then it means that we should read it into the train data. So we will do the same thing. I just copy it here and paste it here, and the place where we have the test, I will be using train, and this will be train, and also here just I'm going to copy and paste, and this one will be train. So we read the train data and also need to increase the index, and that's it. So this is only depending on if index is here, we will read it into test data, otherwise we will read the row into x underscore train. And once we read all those things, we can now return. What we need to return is a tuple, so x underscore, the order is very important, remember, x underscore train, then y underscore train, and then x underscore test, and y underscore test. Okay, so now the error is gone because there was no return statement. So this method for test train split is also ready, and can we call it from the form? So let's go there. And now we already defined the variables, so x underscore train and y underscore train, x underscore test, y underscore test, okay, is equals to C helper class dot test train split, and this test train split is expecting data underscore set, and also the labels. So on data underscore labels, we must have the data labels, and let's say we want a split of 20% for testing and 80% for training. And if it is successful and there is no error, then we can say label dot text is equal to data split into test and train. Okay, let us run this and test again. So as we mentioned that if we directly go to test train, it should give us an error. Load data first. Okay, so first we need to load the data. So the data is loaded, and then we can test train split. So data split into test and a train. It means it is working fine.